Okay. We are up to 27A1. Okay, let's begin. The Gemara says as follows: Eluhen ma'amadot. These are the ma'amadot. Lefi shene'emar, tzavet b'nei Yisrael amata lehem et korbani lachmi le'ishai. So it says these are the ma'amadot, and then it gives you a pasuk. So it doesn't tell you what the ma'amadot are. So the Gemara explains what it's trying to say. My ka'amar, hachi ka'amar, eluhen ma'amadot. These are the ma'amadot. But so this part is like, so to speak, missing in the text of the Mishnah. But matam tiknu ma'amadot. What's the reason why we have the ma'amadot at all? Lefi shene'emar, because it says, it's almost like when you have an article that's quoting somebody, and in the speech pattern they haven't like put in the words, and then I said to him, so they put them in parentheses. So that's what's going on here. Eluhen ma'amadot, these are the ma'amadot, and on that we say, what's it called? We say, what's the reason for that? The reason for that is because it says in the pasuk, this is my korban, lahmi, my food, my offering, liishai, for the fires of the mizbeach, right? And how could there be a korban that's the korban of the Jewish people when there's no one standing there at the time? So therefore, the early prophets declared that there should be 24 ma'amadot, 24 mishmarot, segments of people that are present for the korban. For every mishmar, every group of 24, every one of the 24 groups of Am Yisrael, Kohanim Levim Yisraelim, there was a segment of Kohanim Levim Yisraelim that were Vishel Yerushalayim. There was in Yerushalayim. At the time, 3 of these. We already explained the machloket, whether or not there was a segment of Yisraelim that had to go up, or it was just that there happened to be Yisraelim that also lived there. They attended, but other Yisraelim lived in the other places and they stayed put wherever they were. Higiyazman mishmar la'alot, when the time came for them to go to the Beit HaMikdash, or the Israel, to Yerushalayim, Kohanim and Levim, the Kohanim and Levim would go up to Yerushalayim, and they would be present, and through that, it was as if Am Yisrael was present for their korban. Tanu Rabbanan. There are 24 mishmarot in Eretz Israel. And there was 12 in Yericho. The Gemara says, 1 second, what are you talking about? That comes out. You just told me that there's 24 in Israel. And then you're telling me that there's 12 in Yericho on top of that. That means that we already have 36. Yeah? Answers the Gemara. 1 second, hold up. You're not understanding what we're saying here. Ella, what it means to say, Ella, 12 of them are in Yericho. 12 of the 24 are in Yericho. What does that mean, that 12 of the 24 in Yericho? The Braita continues now, that we were discussing earlier. The time when it came for them to go up to Yerushalayim, half of the Mishmar would go up to Jerusalem. And the Chatzia Mishmar, and half of the Mishmar hala oleh Yericho. Half of it would go up to Yericho, which was a nearby city. Why? In order that they should be able to provide for food and for sustenance for the ones that were in Jerusalem, because remember, they were not there from their homes. They had come up to Jerusalem to do the Mishmar work. So who was taking care of these people when they got home from their daily work in the temple during their shift? So therefore they were in Yericho. So what the Mishnah, what the Braita is trying to tell me is that half of those people, i.e. half of the 24, were in Yericho. How much is half of 24? 12 Mishmarot. Now that's a strange way of saying that, by the way. Because if you're trying to say that half of the Mishmar was in Yericho,
just say 12 right away.
Just say, 24 Mishmarot would go up to Yerushalayim. Half of that Mishmar would go down. It's not that 12 Mishmarot were from Yericho. It's all 24 were in Yericho.
Right.
Remember, how did this work? You have a Mishmar. Let's say Mishmar is 1 through 10. 10 people, right? Just for the math. 10 people leave wherever they live and they go up to Yerushalayim. Half of them need to provide food for the other half. So half of them go to Yericho. After a few days, they swap. The ones in Yerushalayim come to Yericho and they provide the food, and the other ones went from Yericho back to Yerushalayim and they did Avodah. or they stood by the korbanot, or they read the Sifrei Torah, or they were the Kohanim, or they were the Leviim. What that means is that all 24 mishmarot were in Yerushalayim and Yericho. It's not that 12 of them were in Yericho. So it's a strange way of communicating that half of the people were there, but nevertheless, the Gemara understands it in the Braita in that way. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Kohanim v'Leviim Yisraelim me'akvin et hakorban. All Kohanim, Leviim and Yisraelim me'akvin et hakorban. So there's a machloket exactly what this word me'akvin means. Me'akvin can be understood in two different ways. Number one, it can be understood to mean that they do not allow the korban to be fulfilled, right? So like sometimes we say, lo natan, lo ikev. If he did not put, it doesn't mess up the korban, right? It's not me'akev. So as an example, if a person supposed to do a certain thing in the prayers, and if he didn't do it, lo me'akev, you still yotzeh your tefillah. So one way of understanding the word me'akev means if you do not have the Kohanim, the Leviim, the Yisraelim there and present, me'akvin, it means that the korban needs to be redone because the korban was not fulfilled. B'matnita Tana, in the Braita we learned on this exact idea that we just said, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, very similar. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Kohanim and Leviim v'chlei shir, and the musical instruments, me'akvin et hakorban, all are me'akev the korban. They withhold the korban. Now the second way of understanding the word me'akev does not mean that it invalidates the korban. It means me'akev is that you hold up the korban until you can get that done. So it's important enough that we wait for it. We don't just say, you know what, it's not important, carry on. So two different ways of understanding the word me'akvin.
So you're waiting for them to be there?
You're waiting for the Israelim, let's say if they're late, you wait for them to arrive. Because you can't do it without them. The other opinion is, if I did it without them, we're not yotzeh, and it's me'akev, and therefore they need to do it again. So the first memra is Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, and on that it said, Kohanim Leviim Israelim are me'akev. The second bit, which is the Braita, says, no, not Kohanim Leviim Israelim. Kohanim Leviim and Klei Shir. The commentaries point out that it seems like, if you remember, we spoke about this earlier, that there's two opinions as to whether or not the Israelim are there or not. From the Braita, it seems like the first opinion is right, because it says that Yisraelim me'akvim. So the answer to that is that they'll learn that me'akev doesn't mean that it's not good. It means that you wait for them if they're coming. Okay? The second opinion will learn no me'akev. But then that second opinion that learns that you need to have Yisraelim, they have a problem with the second part of the Mishnah, because it says Kohanim Leviim v'Klei Shir, it skips Yisraelim. So on that, the commentators answer that in another part of the Braita already told you that you needed the Yisraelim, so therefore it's not mentioning it again. The only reason why Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is bringing it back is to tell you about the avodah part, that the avodah cannot be done without the musical accompaniment. And therefore, if that's the case, so that's why it leaves out Yisraelim, because they're not part of the avodah. However, the Gemara continues. So what is Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel arguing with Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar? The Gemara answers, Mar savar ikar shira bepeh, umar savar ikar shira bekeli. One opinion holds that the important part of the musical accompaniment of the korbanot was done bepeh, singing. The Leviim was sitting there, singing on the top of their lungs. That's the main thing. What's the music there for? Only to accompany the voices of the Leviim. But if the Leviim sing, then the korban, you will yotzeh. Which opinion is that? That's the first opinion. It doesn't mention the music. So if they were singing with their voices, but there was no music, you still will yotzeh. The second opinion says, no, it's true that the Leviim sing. But what the main thing of the song is to have the special flutes that they used to use in the temple, and if you didn't have that music, so then it wasn't good enough. So the second opinion says not just Kohanim Leviim, but Kohanim Leviim accompanied by the Klei Shir that was played by the Leviim. Okay, now the Gemara continues and explains, how do we get to a place where we have these 24 Mishmarot? Because the Mishnah already said that those 24 Mishmarot were appointed by the Nevi'im Rishonim, by the first Nevi'im. Amar Rav Chama Rav Guria Amarav. Rav Chama says, the son of Guria in the name of Rav, Moshe tiken leim Yisrael shmona mishmarot. Moshe made 8 mishmarot, Arba me'Elazar, Arba me'Itamar. 4 mishmarot that came from the outcroppings of the family of Elazar, and 4 from the family of Itamar. Shmuel comes along and he divides it now into 16 different groups, not 8 different groups. Now, one can understand, obviously, that at the time of Moshe, who were the fathers of the Kohanic families? Only Elazar and Itamar. Because there are 4 Kohanic sons. Who are they? Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Itamar. What happens to Nadav and Avihu? They die. What about their kids? They never had kids. So the only Kohanim is really the two sons. So Moshe Rabbeinu divides the children of the sons of Aharon into 8 different groups, and each one would take a turn doing the avodah. Okay? Comes Shemuel. By that time, obviously, you have many, many more Kohanim. It's hundreds of years later. So when Shemuel comes along, he sets the number at 16. He redivides. He does redistricting for the Kohanim. Once Shemuel set it at 16, but David HaMelech came along. David HaMelech came along and he did 24. Now, what's really interesting is if you understand this from the historical perspective, you realize that there's a difference between Shemuel and Moshe and David and Shemuel. And we'll explain why in just a second. The Gemara brings a pasuk to prove this point that David HaMelech was the one that instituted the 24 Mishmarot. It brings a pasuk, Bishnat Arba'im le'malchut David shene'emar nidrushu. They searched out and they v'yimatzeh bahem gibor echayil b'Yazer Gilad. They found these warriors in Yazer Gilad. The psukim over there are describing the 24 Mishmarot that were appointed by David HaMelech. And since that pasuk is describing the 40th year of David's reign, what do we know about the 40th year of David's reign? That Shemuel, who was the prophet that anointed David and made him the king, was no longer alive, because by that point, he was no longer alive. How do we know that? We already see from the time of Shaul, at the end of Shaul's life, that Shemuel has died. Right? So therefore, at that stage of David's kingdom, it could not have been Shemuel. It must have been through David. What's the difference between Moshe to Shemuel and Shemuel to David? That makes sense that there should be a proliferation of 8 to 16 from Moshe to Shemuel. But from Shemuel to David, they're in the same generation. It's not like there's an explosion of Kohanim. If anything, right, my friends, ask me a question.
Should there be less Kohanim?
There should be less Kohanim. Why?
David killed people?
David did not kill people.
Yeah, people killed.
But during the time of David, right? David hid out and was helped by the Kohanim of the city of Nov. And what does Shaul do to the Kohanim that are helping David? He kills the city of Kohanim.
Wow.
So there's less Kohanim. And he's making more Mishmarot. So it's obvious that the shift from from Moshe to Shemuel might have been Avi Oster's asking to dial in. You might, I don't know how you add, if you can add him. The shift from David to Shemuel, from Moshe to Shemuel might have been utilitarian, but the shift from from Shemuel to David, there had to be a specific reason why he preferred to have 24 Mishmarot. Okay? Let's carry on. Metveh, the Gemara asks a question. Moshe tiken lehem Yisrael. Moshe arranged for Yisrael shmoneh mishmarot. Arba melaz arba mitamar. Rabba David v'Shmuel v'hedi midan al 24. Come Shmuel and Moshe and Shmuel David, and they moved the number from 8 to 24. Shneimar, as it says, Hema Yisad David u'Shmuel haro'eh be'emunatam. It was them. The pasuk says specifically that it was David and Shmuel haro'eh, the one that saw, i.e., the prophet, that were mitaken be'emunatam, that should be the way that it moved on for all of time. So the pasuk that's quoting this, the Braita that's quoting this pasuk, that the change came from David and Shmuel together, and that this meaning was referencing the establishment of the 24 Mishmarot, that's against what Rav said earlier, that it happened 8, 16, 24. It seems like it went 8 directly to 24. And there wasn't a separate David Shmuel number. The Gemara answers, Hachikamar misodo shel David u'Shmuel haramati. It means midum al 24. Misodo. In other words, even though it wasn't necessarily a gradual thing, but from the rulings of Shmuel and David together, they were able to do it. Now, I just want you to take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Mi Yisodo. You see it? Yeah, it's roughly a little bit more than halfway down in Rashi. Midan al Yudvav, from Shmuel, you had 16. Ba David v'hemidan al Chavdalet. Sfarim shekatuv bahen miyisodo של שמואל ודוד הם ידעו על כ"ד. כלומר, שניהם הועיל בדבר שמואל העמידם על י"ו ודוד על כ"ד. So it seems to be that there's two different understandings as to what the answer of the Gemara is. One answer of the Gemara is that this was the extension of what Shmuel was doing. So Shmuel moved it to 16 and David continued moving. It was a continuation of Shmuel's gezerah. And the second opinion is no, miyisodo shel Shmuel v'David together, this process happened and it skipped the 24, but Rav was only telling you about the kind of the conversational pieces or the evolutionary pieces of the shift from 8 to 24. Tanya idach, we learned in another braita, Moshe tiken lahem Yisrael, shesh mashmerot. Another braita says no, Moshe did not do 8. Moshe did 16. Shmona me'Elazar, Shmona me'Itamar, 8 from each of the two sons. When Elazar had many more children than the sons of Itamar, so then they redivided the mishmarot into 24 sets of mishmarot. So now all of the Kohanim had an equal chance to be able to serve, and you didn't have one group that had many more chances to serve because they were a smaller family in the children of Elazar.
This is before David.
Sorry?
This would be before David.
Right now the Gemara is not saying anything, it doesn't explain, it doesn't give us any time, okay? Shene'emar, as it says, V'yimatzu b'nei Elazar rabim l'rashei hagvarim min b'nei Itamar. And the pasuk says, okay, there was many more. And it was found that the children of Elazar were far more l'rashei hagvarim min b'nei Itamar than the people of b'nei Itamar. V'yechalkum l'b'nei Elazar rashim lebet avot 16. And they divided the house of Elazar to 16. L'b'nei Itamar lebet avotam shemona. And the house of Itamar went to 8 in order that it should be able to redistribute according to the head count of of what we had seen previously. The Gemara asks, okay, one second. Now you're telling me that this is the pasuk, but then the Braita continues and says, "Ve'omer bet av echad achuz leElazar ve'achuz leItamar." There was one, achuz means like a percentage of, right? So a grouping. So there was one grouping of a father's house for Elazar and 2 for Itamar. So you see that whatever grouping Elazar had, Itamar had that same grouping times 2. The Gemara now asks, okay, you told me the first pasuk, which said clearly 16 and 8, and now you're coming along and you're telling me this extra pasuk. What is added in the extra pasuk that was not there in the first one? Mai ve'omer, what do you benefit from ve'omer from the second one? If you'd like to say that when the same way that the children of Elazar got more, so bnei Itamar also grew. Shmona mi'ikara arba havu. The 8 that they are now, they used to be 4. Right? So the Gemara is explaining that whereas in the first pasuk it says, and you found that Bnei Elazar Rabim l'Rashei Hagvarim and Bnei Tamar, and they divided them 16 and 8. So the question you might have asked was, 1 second, I understand that there was more Bnei Elazar, but there had also been an increase in the Bnei Itamar. So how come they didn't get more? And the Gemara's answer is, you learn from the second part that they did, and it was a 2-to-1 ratio that we added. So therefore, if initially they were 4 and 4, now they became 16 and 8. Okay? They were originally 4, now they became 8. Tashma, let's prove this point. Okay? Let's hear, is it true or not? Bet av echad achuz le'Elazar ve'achuz litamar. One house was for Elazar, and 2 portions of the house for Itamar. So if you would think that they had not grown, The answer is that you might have thought that it went from 4 to 8 and the other side went to 8 to 16. And the answer is actually no. From the beginning, it remained at 8. This is what it was always. All we did was increase the side of Itamar. So therefore, what are the two Pesukim? The two Pesukim are there to tell you how this evolved. Did it go 4, 4, 16, 8? Or did it go 8, 8, 16, 8? So when we learn that in the second time that the ratio was 2 to 1, we understand that it was always 16 and 8. You might have been able to think that it changed from 4 to 8 in Elazar.
Because you said 8 now used to be 4.
8 now used to be. You might have thought that way.
Right.
Tashma, we come in here and listen. The second pasuk proves the point that it was always this way. There was just one extra one. What's it called for Elazar? Bet Av echad achuz, right? Ve'achuz li'itamar. The Gemara is now learning the pasuk in another way. It's saying that Bet Av echad, one extra achuz was added to Elazar. But for Itamar was ve'achuz li'itamar. Whatever portion they had, they remained with that portion. So the Gemara is expressing that the situation did not change. The situation did not change for what's it called? For the tribe of Itamar. Tiyufta de Rav Chama bar Guria. This seems to be a knockout punch to Rav Chama bar Guria, right? Because before we said that Moshe Rabbeinu did 4 and 4, which is 8. And then later on it went to 16, and later on it went to 24. Either it went straight to 24, or it passed by 16 on the way to 24. But at the very least, Moshe Rabbeinu did 8. And according to this, if it was 8 from the beginning, so then Moshe Rabbeinu did 16 already. And that's why it doesn't mention, like you asked, when does it say? It doesn't say when he did it, which would indicate that 16 was already from the beginning. The Gemara answers, Tanai, Rav Chama bar Guria would explain to you, no, there's a machloket Tanaim. Your Braita is saying 16. And I'm holding according to the other opinion that says that he did 4 and 4, which equals 8. So your Braita is just another person who said, who offered another opinion as to how many mishmarot were there from the beginning, from the time of Moshe. Tanu Rabbanan. We learned in a Braita. Arba mishmarot alu min hagola. 4 mishmarot, right, went up min hagola from Galut to Eretz Israel. Ve'eluhen, and these were the 4 that came back to Israel from Galut Bavel. Okay, so that's in the aftermath of the story of Purim. Ve'eluhen, who are these 4? Yedaya. The first one was Yedaya, which is also known as Harim. Pashchur, okay? Yedaya was 1. Harim is the 2nd. Pashchur is the 3rd. And Imer is the 4th. Those are the 4 houses that came back to Eretz Israel from the Gola. Amdu Nivim. Because the Gemara was missing, and they're inserting it from another, from another source, which is coming from the pasuk in Ezra, when the Jewish people returned to the land of Israel. But in the Gemara, there was one word missing, and the Gemara is reinserting it from the actual pasuk in Ezra. Amdu nivim shibenehem, the prophets amongst them stood up, v'chilekum v'hemidum al 24, and we're turning the page of Chav Zayin Amud Bet, v'chilkum, and they divided them v'hemidum al 24. So they took the 4 remaining ones that came back, and they divided them into 24. Bilalum v'natanum bekalpi. They mixed them all up, and they put them in the box, like we saw already earlier. Bayidaye, the first son came, the first Bet Av, v'natal helko v'chelek chaverav. He took his chelek v'chelek chaverav 6. Okay, he took 6. Baharim v'natal helko v'chelek chaverav 6. V'chen pashchur v'chen emar. Each one came. They took their own house and 6 other houses. So imagine there are 24 houses. These 4, Yedaya, Harim, Pashchur, and Imer. But there was also another, how many remaining? Another 18. Another 20, excuse me. So they took the 20, they mixed them in with those 4. Each one took their own name and then took took out however many more. So in total, how many did each one have? Each one had 6. But that instituted the cycle of the calendar based on what those other families had previously. Now you took over their portion and their turn on the docket. Okay?
And these were Kohanim or these are prophets or both?
No, the prophets were the ones that divided them. Which prophets were there at the time? We had Ezra and Nehemiah were the ones that led the Jewish people back. Okay? So every one of them did that. And then the Nevi'im amongst them made a Tanai. Shafilu Yehoyadav, Rosh Mishmeret Oleh. Even if the highest of the Mishmarot, which was Yehoyadiv, Yehoyariv, 2 different nuschaot, okay? Even if he was to come to Eretz Israel now, later, with his entire thing, and he wants to grab his position back because he was a Rosh Mishmeret, they're the most important, first of the Mishmarot. Still, they would lo yidacheh Yidaya mikomo. Yidaya would not be pushed out from his place. Ela Yidaya ikar v'Yehoyariv tafelo. Yidaya was now the main Rosh HaMishmarot, and Yehoyariv was second. What's the reason for this? Okay. You have to remember that not all of the Kohanim decided to come back. And Ezra and Nehemiah were basically asking the Jewish people to return and rebuild Jerusalem. So not everyone wanted to do that. So the ones that came, they were the ones that were notel chelek barosh. They took, first, so to speak, first dibs on everything. The Gemara then continues and describes what happens after that. Yisrael shebeoto mishmar mitkansim ba'arehem. So if you remember, we talked about the fact that Yisrael that's in Yerushalayim goes to do their job, or some of them go to Yerushalayim. Yisrael shebeoto mishmar, Yisrael that are in that mishmar mitkansim ba'arehem. If they were not there in Jerusalem, they would gather together in their cities. V'korim ma'aseh Bereshit, and they would read from the beginning of Bereshit. The Gemara asks, how do we learn this idea that the people of the Anshe Mishmar now have to learn Chumash Bereshit? And what's the connection between these two things? So how do we know it? And where does it come from? What's the connection between the two? Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha Amar Rabbi Yasi, Rabbi Yaakov the son of Acha said the name of Rabbi Yasi, Ilmale Ma'amadot, if not for the Ma'amadot, Lo nitkaimu shamayim va'aretz. If we were not able to bring these korbanot, which are sustained by the ma'amadot, the heavens and earth would not continue to exist. Shneimar, like it says, v'yomer Amunai Elokim b'meh eda ki irashena. Avraham Avinu, when he's going into the Brit Ben Abitarim, he asks Kadosh Baruch Hu, "You're telling me you're going to give me the land of Israel? Okay, fine, but how do I know that I'll be able to inherit it?" Okay. Amar Avraham, Ribono Shel Olam. Avraham said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Master of the world, Shem Yisrael chotim lefanecha, ata oseh lehem kedor mabu v'kedor haflaga. How do I know that you're not going to do to my children what you did to the Dor HaMabur and Dor HaFlaga when they sinned so wickedly you destroyed them? Amar lo lav, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said no. Amar lefalav, Avraham, Ribono Shel Olam, odieni b'ma yirashena. 1 second, Master of the world, you've now promised me that you're not going to destroy them. Fine, but how do I know? What's the what's going to allow them to be able to do teshuvah? Maybe they'll sin to the point where they won't be able to inherit the earth, even if you're not going to wipe them out. They won't be able to inherit Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. Amale, he said to him, Kecha li eglat mishuleshet ve'oz mishuleshet al mishulash. Please go and get me these animals, divide them into 3, split them apart, go between them. And he made the Brit Ben Abitarim, the covenant with God between the pieces of the animals. So what was he really communicating? Avraham was worried that there would be no way for them to be able to get what HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised because they might make a mistake. What's God's response? God's response is, Kechu lachem, go out and get this korban, this animal service, and that will essentially bring you to a place where you don't need to worry about the fact that your children have sinned, because they'll gain kapara. So since that's the case, with kapara, it means that the children of Israel will not be destroyed like in the flood. They will not be destroyed like in the generation of the dispersion. Put it on mute, please. Okay, right? So since that's the answer to the question is, how do I know they won't be destroyed? Was bring this korban, this brit ben abitarim, illustrating that the korban itself is something that if you did not have would bring destruction to the world. So therefore, when we're reading something from the Torah about the korban, what are we going to read? We're going to read about the creation of heaven and earth. The Gemara continues. Amar lefanav, Avraham continued talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono Shalom, Master, that's good when the Jewish people have the Beit HaMikdash. What's going to be with the Jews when there's no Beit HaMikdash? Amar lo, kvar tikanti lahem seder korbanot. I already instituted for them seder korbanot, the portion of the korbanot in the Torah. Bisman shekorim bahen lefanai, when they read those portions, ma'aleh ani alehem kilu yikrivum lefanai, I consider it as if they brought the actual korban, v'ani mochel lahem al kol avonotehem, and I bring them forgiveness on all their sins. This is the importance of reading korbanot and why we have korbanot as the reading in the morning and in the afternoon, so it's as if we actually brought the korbanot themselves. So Abraham's response is that this is what we need. That's our korbanot. No, korbanot in the morning. Before Shacharit, you read all about the actual sacrifices.
Oh, that's not Ketor. That's not where we read the Ketoret?
Ketoret we're reading at the end of prayers, right?
Also in the beginning, no?
Yes, but that's besides for the korbanot.
Oh, not.
And korbanot we don't read at the end.
Got it.
Right? Okay? Okay. Let's continue.
That's crazy.
Where are we? Okay. Let's continue on. Tana Rabbanan. Anshe Mishmar. The people of the Mishmar. Hayu mitpalin al korban achehem shitkabel beratzon. They would pray at that time that the korban of their brothers, because remember they're bringing this situation is really on behalf of all the Jews in Am Yisrael. So they would pray that the korban of their brothers shitkabel beratzon should be accepted with goodwill from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'anshe ma'amad mitkansin lebet HaKnesset v'yoshvin daled ta'anuyot. And the people of the Ma'amad that were not stationed there, as we said, would gather in the Beit HaKnesset and they would sit 4 Tanuyot, 4 days, a series of 4 fasts. What were those fasts? B'sheni, b'shabbat, b'shelishi, b'revi'i, b'hamishi. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. B'sheni al Yodei Hayam. On the second day, the fast was to merit the people that were traveling in the ocean. B'shelishi al Hoche derachim. On the third day, Midbarot, on the third day, Tuesday, they were fasting for the people that were traveling in the desert. B'revi'i, on Tuesday, al askera shelo tipol al atinokot. They fasted so that the children should not become sick with this plague called askera. And they say that that's the plague that killed and wiped out all the students of Rabbi Akiva in 33 days, 24,000 students. B'chamishi, on the 5th day, al ubarot umenikot, on the 5th day, on Thursday, they would fast for all those that were pregnant and all those that were nursing. Ubarot shelo yapilu, those that were pregnant, that they should not lose their child. Menikot sheniku benehem, and the ones that are nursing, that they should be able to have enough nourishment to be able to sustain their children. On Erev Shabbat, they would not do it in order to have the honor of Shabbat. How much more so on Shabbat itself? There was no fasting. Why is it not kavod Shabbat to fast on Friday? It's not Shabbat, and by the time Shabbat comes in, you're already not fasting because it's the next day. So what's the issue? The issue is that the person is coming into Shabbat ravenous. So it's not kavod that you're coming in starving. You just want to tear apart the food and you can't pay attention to Shabbat itself. Okay, fine, I got you. Friday, got you. Shabbat, gotcha, for sure. How come not on Sunday then? You told me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Because of the people from Notzrim is the word that we use for Christians. Okay? Why do we do that? Because they came from the city of Notzrat. Okay? That city became the epicenter of Christianity. Now, the Gemara is referring, I believe, here to people that were already predating the Christianity when we talk about this, okay? But at the same time, the people in the city of Nozrat, they used to fast on Sunday. And since fasting on Sunday would seem like we were tuning into their program, and that would be a Chilul Hashem, because that's not what we're doing, right? That's not how we we keep. So therefore, in order to uproot from the idea that we're doing what they do, they wouldn't fast on the Sunday.
How come we don't point that it's not Jewish people? We would know that the Nutzarim were non-Jewish people?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay? Let's carry on and we'll finish with this last piece. Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani says, Mnei shehu shlishi yitzira. The reason is because actually the Sunday is the third day that takes place after the creation of Adam Harishon. Because Adam Harishon is Yom Shishi, right? Then you have Shabbat, you have Shishi, Shabbat, and Yom Rishon. So who cares that it's the third day? Why is that important? Anyone know?
So like Abraham, the third day.
Excellent. Abraham on the third day, Yom HaShlishi, that's when he's feeling the weakest. So anything that is a huge event, a huge physical event, 3 days after that physical event is when we're most nervous about the person's weakness. So therefore, on Sunday, which is a day of weakness for man, so we don't fast on that day. Rish Lakish, Rish Lakish holds, are we? Rish Lakish Omer, Bnei Yishama Yitera, because of the extra neshama. What does that mean? Ta'amar Rish Lakish, Neshama Yitera nitna bo ba'adam be'erev Shabbat. On Erev Shabbat, before Shabbat comes in, an extra soul is given to the person before Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat notlin ota yemenu. On Motzei Shabbat, they take that extra soul, the Neshama Yitera of Shabbat. Shneimar, as it says, Shabbat, vayinafash. Vayinafash, normally we translate it means that he rested. But Vayinafash, the Gemara is translating it here as a verb, as he became souled, that a soul was given to him. Kevan Shabbat, once a person fasts, Vay Avda Nefesh, once the Shabbat is gone, right, it's very difficult that extra soul, the extra soul has left. And since the extra soul that left creates a vacuum, so the rabbis did not want to have an extra fast on Sunday to kind of roll off of the fact that there was a Shabbat vayinafash, there was an extra loss of that neshama. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.
Baruch, beautiful.